Tonight's shir, Be'ez Hashem, we're going to speak about the Psul, or the din, Niktam, by Haddasim and by Aravos. The din of Niktam, when we speak about the din of Niktam, here are we talking about Niktam, that it was chopped off, is Mavur. The Rabbi spells it out later on in the Siman, that Niktam means dafka, the branch on the top of the Hadas, or the top of the Arava broke off. If Lu Yitzur, only the leaf broke, it's kosher. Like Mikri Niktam, Ela Niktam or Eitzim. Niktam is only if dafka, if the branch part broke, if Lu Yitzur, the leaf got broken, that's not called Niktam and it's kosher. However, the Sefer Chaim Ubracha, it's a Sefer on Dalet Minim, he has a scum of Reb Chaim Brisker. He says, but Kol Mokum, there's a hiddur to even make sure that even the leaves, also the leaves as well, shouldn't be Niktam. But the din Niktam is a din on the branch, it's not a din on the leaves. If the leaves are broken off, that's not where the din Niktam that we're going to be speaking about. The Rosh explains why by Haddasim is Niktam referring to the branch as opposed to by Lulav. By Lulav Niktam, the din Niktam by Lulav is definitely on the leaf. The din Niktam by Lulav that the halach is that it's possible the leaves up the Rosh, because by a Lulav, the top of the Lulav is always a leaf. So Mamela Niktam is talking about the leaf as opposed to Haddasim. Sometimes the top of a Hadas is the leaf. Sometimes the top of the Hadas is the branch. Therefore, when we speak about Niktam, Niktam is referring to the branch, not referring to the leaf. And obviously it's only the top. Sometimes you can have a branch coming out in the Hadas on the side, which could be even up here. You have to trim it off, but that does not cause it to be a Niktam. A Niktam is only the most upper part of the Hadas that's chopped off, that's Niktam.
It's not a son of Shilish if you don't have the whole leaf.
What do you mean if you don't have the whole leaf? If we say the leaf is Niktam?
Yeah.
So that's going to be Be'ez Hashem next year, speaking about Meshulash, what defines Meshulash, what's Rubai, what's Kulai. But Lu Yitzur, you have the shear, the amount that you need the leaves Meshulash. You have that amount. Lu Yitzur, you have it. Do you need the top? You must probably don't need the top. We'll speak about it also. But Medin Niktam is only a din only on the top and only on the branch. What's the halacha of Niktam? What's the halacha by Niktam when it's cut off the top? What's the halacha? By Lulav, it's clear. The halacha is that it's Psul. What's by Hadas? So the Mishnah, the Ulam Misrabli saw the Mishnah says, Daf Lamed Beis, the Mishnah says that a Hadas that's Niktam is Psul. Hadas Agozel Vayovish Psul, Vaiter Rosh Nifza Al Vashayara. Sorry, Niktam Roshay is Psul. The Mishnah says Niktam is Psul. However, there's a Mishnah Vaiter Daf Lamed Dal Lamed Beis. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Shmuel, when discussing how many Haddasim, how many Aravos, and Zok the Mishnah, Lamadal Lamed Beis, Rav Tarfanim, Afilu Shloshtam Ketumin, even if all three Haddasim are Kotum, they're cut, the top is knocked off, it's kosher. So we have two Mishnayos. We have a Stam Mishnah that says that it's Psul. We have a Mishnah of Tarfan that says that it's kosher. Zok the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Halacha Rav Tarfan. The Rav Tarfan says that a Niktam is kosher. That it's kosher. The Rambam taka paskins like that. The Rambam and quite a few other Rishonim also paskin that a Hadas that's in Niktam is kosher. Loshen Rambam a Perik Ches from Hilchos Lulav. The Rambam says Halacha Hey Hadas sheniktam Roshay is kosher. The Rambam says clearly that a Haddasim that the top is knocked off is kosher. However, the Shitas HaRavid, the Ravid over there is Masig on the Rambam, and the Ravid argues, and the Ravid holds that Hadas HaNiktam is Psul. and it's Psul. He says Kestam Mishnah. The Beragoyla brings it Kestam Mishnah, that the Mishnah of Lamed Beis says Hadas Niktam is Psul. Even though the Gemara says Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel Halacha Reb Tarfin that Hadas Niktam is kosher. So the Rabbi said a lashon v'kvar hayfia ruach hakodesh bebeis medrashenu. There's ruach hakodesh in our beis medrash v'kama shanim v'helinu shu Psul. So the Rabbi says even though the Gemara says Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel is hesberim, but the Rabbi says that it's Psul, and the Rabbi says kvar sharal ruach hakodesh. The Chassam Sofer and Tshuva explains what does it mean kvar that there was ruach hakodesh. So the Chassam Sofer says it doesn't mean Ruach HaKodesh like Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech had Ruach HaKodesh. It means that when a person learns Torah Lashma, a person gets koiches min hashamayim more than the regular. A person has a koich to learn, to understand. When a person learns Torah the right way, he gets, even a teva of a person's chachma he wouldn't be able to understand, he gets a siyata d'shmaya. So that's what the Rabbi said, that their siyata d'shmaya came out that a niktam is Psul. So Lamaisa, this Machlokes Rishonim, which we saw as the two Mishnayos, is brought by us in Shulchan Aruch Sif Yud. Even though if you saw the Shulchan Aruch in the beginning, the Shulchan Aruch says Hadas, the beginning of Tafresh Mem Vav, the Shulchan Aruch Sif Aleph starts off Hadas Sheniktam Roishay is kosher. The Shulchan Aruch says Stam that it's kosher. So the Rambam starts off with the Shulchan Aruch starts off with the Shitas HaRambam, that the Rambam says that it's kosher, but later on in Sif Yud, Niktam Roishay kosher, and then V'yesh Poisla b'Niktam Roishay. So there's a machlokes if Niktam Roishay is kosher or not. Let's try to understand the pshat why Niktam should be kosher. L'chayr by Lulav. By other meaning, Niktam is Psul. By Aravos, Niktam is Psul. So what's by Haddasim that it's different? Why by Haddasim is Niktam kosher? Shitas HaRambam. So to be able to understand why Niktam is kosher, we have to really understand what's the problem, why it's Psul. The Achroinim, the Poskim, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Mishnah Berurah brings it. Why would Niktam be Psul? Like the Mishnah Berurah over here in Hilchos by Haddasim, that Niktam is Psul because it's not Hadar. It's not Hadar. It's not Hadar. So it's cut off. You look at a Lulav cut off, it's not Hadar. You look at a Hadas that's cut off, it's not Hadar. So what's the pshat in the shitas that hold that it's kosher? L'chayr it's not Hadar. So we'll see there are many different mahalchim to understand why Niktam Roishay of a Hadas that's kosher, Shitas HaRambam, it's different than the other minim that are Psul. One hezver is the Rosh. The Rosh in the third Perek, Siman Yudalad, he brings from Rabbi Yeshaya. It's also in the Piskei Arid, from the Tosis Arid. And he says the following. He says that since a Hadas, I have Aravos, we'll get to it soon, but I don't have a Hadas is meshulish, these leaves straight up throughout the whole branch, and memela the leaves go all the way to the top, and the place where it's chopped off it's covered with leaves. So memela there's no chasar in hadar. When you look at a lulav and the top is chopped, so that's a chasar in hadar. It doesn't look nice. But a hadas that's cut off on the top, since the leaves go up all the way to the top, so memela there's no problem, there's no lacking of Hidr.
There's sometimes you could have a tiyanis, which is shorter than the other leaves on the outside, by the lulav. And after picking, you'll still have the din of niktam on that tiyanis, even if it's shorter than the other leaves, and you have to really look into that leaf and see it. So, maybe...
Is it taka klar like that by a lulav if it's tucked in? It could be, first of all, they say not to use such a leaf. If I remember, we learned Hilchos Lulav last year. To look it up, taka. Could be you shouldn't even use such a leaf that's tucked in the tumas. But even if, maybe taka, that it maybe would be okay if it's tucked in. Maybe. Could be. Maybe taka would be okay. But what comes out of this? If the reason why there's no lack of hiddur by Haddasim because the leaves are covering the Niktam. What happens if the top doesn't have leaves? If the leaves are missing and you could see it opened, it would come out its Psul. Which means the Shita that holds the Niktam kosher, Shita Sarambam, one Shita in the Shulchan Aruch that it's kosher, it would only be kosher only Kolzman that it's covered. If it's not covered, it would be Psul. The Pri Megadim actually says that you don't even need all the leaves to be missing to be Psul. Even if one leaf is missing, it's also Psul. So if you want to rely on the Shita that Niktam is kosher because there's no lack of Hidur, that's only if it's covered. But if it's not covered, even if only one leaf is missing, it's a problem. Says the Bekura Yaakov, the Shartzim brings it, says the Bekura Yaakov, that I have an Eitzah. Very interesting. I help if, let's say, it's broken, the top it's cracked, and it's open, there are no leaves over there, and you could see it, and it's takalakin. Cut it down more till you hit into the leaves, which means it's going to be covered, and you can fix it. Very good Eitzah. Ad kedei kach is matmiya. What is the Pri Megadim so concerned if you're only missing one leaf and it's open? Just cut it more. Cut it down, and the Mela, you cut it down that the leaves are going to cover it, and there'll be no problem there'll be no lack of hidur.
Talking about before Yontif.
We're going to get to that in a second. I'll say it right now, Taka. Avada, this that we're talking about, that you should cut it, you could fix it, is only before Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, you can't do it because it's Mesak and Mana. Very good, Rameh. Very good. It's Mesak and Mana. You can only do it before Yom Tov. But the Bekura Yaakov says very pashtaitza, just cut it, and it's going to be covered with the leaves. So the Bekura Yaakov himself is Meyashiv. The reason why others don't give this eitzah, they're talking about a hadas that has exactly the shear. We're going to speak about it, Be'ez Hashem, how much the shear is, and roiv and kuloi, but regardless, the shear hadas of 3 tvachim, forget about the leaves, you need 3 tvachim. No matter roiv or the leaves, but you need 3 tvachim. If the hadas is exactly 3 tvachim, you can't cut it at all down to the leaves, because you're not going to have a kosher shear hadas. In the Ravid says that there's still a chasaron in hadar, which is a chiddush. Hidur really is what you see, and if it's covered, you don't see it. So you have to say that the Ravid says afal pikein, there's still a problem of hadar, either because it's still not nice even if it's covered, or there's one hadar of how it looks, and then when it's missing, that type of hadar is even a bigger chasaron, and therefore even if you can't see it, it'll still be possible.
What if you bite the berries off by Yontif?
What?
What if you bite the berries off by Yontif? And you forgot to remove the berries before Yontif, so on Yontif you bite them.
Maybe that's an Ein Machavan. We're not talking about berries, we're talking about you just cutting the stalks. It's a regular Masak Mana. There could be eating it, Achila, Ein Machavan. Just on a side note, talking about fixing the hadas, we discussed last year, and we had others that spoke about it, about putting glue and fixing the lulav, which many oppose. So yesh lodin over here, you could fix. This is what to be machalak. I'm not asking about Teres Kasha v'Sarachian, but ten l'chacham v'Yosef lekach, the Elam can handle about it. Why by a lulav putting glue to close it up or to keep it closed, close it, is a shaila. Here it seems like you could cut it, which it's mistaber you could cut it, because the whole problem is it's lacking hidur, so you cut it down, it's not lacking hidur anymore.
Even according to the Ravid?
No, the Ravid holds that Niktam is a Psul. The Shitas that hold it's kosher is because the leaves are covering it. Zakta Bekura Yaakov, what happens if the leaves are not covering it? If the leaves are not covering it, cut it down and the leaves will cover it.
So where does the glue come in? So we're going to glue back on the leaves?
We're not talking about glue by Haddasim, if it wasn't clear. Glue by a lulav, the humus, the middle leaf that opens to glue it. There's another pshat in the Rishonim why Niktam by Haddasim is kosher. What's pshat in the Shita? It's really the Mishnah. Niktam is kosher. The Ramban learns, at least how the Chazanish in Hachaim Kuf Menvav understands the Ramban. Others learn differently, but the Chazanish understands that the Ramban says it does not make a difference b'chlal if the upper part is niktam. Why? Because there's a difference between the min of a hadas and the lulav. By a lulav, the lulav is the top leaf. By that, and if you're missing that top leaf, sefelt in the hidder, you're lacking hodder. As opposed to haddasim, like the Torah calls it, anaf eitz avos, the meshulish, the leaves that go around it. That's what makes the hadas pretty. And memela, even if there's a chop on the top, but if going down, you have ruba, you have kulay meshulish, you have the shear, that's called hodder. So even Lefi the Ramban, says the Chazon Ish, even if it's visible, you can see the chop on the top, it's still going to be kosher. Lefi the first pshat in the Rishonim that it's covered, Sabada, if it's open, it's problematic. Lefi the Ramban explains that the reason why Niktam is kosher is because we don't care what the top looks like. As long as along down the whole stem, it looks nice, it's meshulish, it's kosher. This is a little easier to be masber now, the Ravid. The Ravid that says that it's Psul, because Lamaisa, if it's cut on top, it's not a hodder. In the first pshat, it was a little harder to understand what's the lack of hidder. Lamaisa, it's covered. But if this pshat fakert, the shita that says that it's kosher is a chiddush. That Lamaisa, nafetz avis, as long as it's mishulish down, that's the hodder. You don't need the top to be covered. So that, we could understand. The Ravid learns, no, that still lacks in hidder. The Chazon Ish wants to say that L'kula Alma, all the Rishonim will agree that that if you hold Niktam is kosher, even if it's uncovered, it's still going to be kosher. Okay, so that's the Vayla. We have about two shatim in Niktam kosher, and nafkamina ladina in Niktam, if let's say it's covered, if it's not covered, if it's still going to be kosher. These are third pshat in Niktam kosher. The third pshat in Niktam kosher is based off what Rashi explains. Rashi says, it's come out before Rashi says, you know what, Reb Tarfon says Niktam, even all three are Niktam, it's kosher. Dr. Rashi, Lashon Rashi is because you don't need hidder, you don't, the loy boy hodder. Which would mean, you're telling me that when it's cut, it lacks hodder. Ulakachtem lachem b'yoyim harishon priyates hodder. A hada, a rava, a lulav needs hodder. A esrig needs hodder. The Gemara's makish. Haddasim you don't need hodder. There's no din hodder by Haddasim. And memela, even if it's niktam, it'll be kosher.
The other time holds there is hodder?
That's l'chayr what would come out. The emes is, what'd you say? Menumer.
If you have Scheiner and Eureka,
by Haddasim.
yeah, we say Psul Menumer. You could say it's going on for the other time, but we're not focused on knowing how to darshan, just hidder Haddasim.
So I'll tell you like this. It's a good point that you bring about Menumer, but we'll get back to Mamash in a second. So what comes out of this third pshat, the reason why Niktam is kosher is because the loy boy, you don't need hodder. You don't need hodder. So we have either you need hodder and you have hodder, or now we're saying you don't need hodder. The Ramban says you could see the cup and it's still hodder. Now we're saying you could see it and you don't need hodder. This concept, if you need or if you don't need hodder by Haddasim, which you're bringing very well from the Mishnah Lagabi Menumer, Be'etzim there's a shmuz about it, the Pnei Yeshua and Sukkot Daf Lamed Aleph. And the Pnei Yeshua says that only lulav, obviously esrog, only lulav needs hodder. The Gemara is makish hodder, loy boy hodder, machlekes tanakat Rabban and Rabbi Yehuda. Hadas does not need hodder, and he explains in the Mishnah that says yavish is Psul. Pashtus the Psul yavish is because it's not hodder, it's not pretty, it's not nice. So he says no, that's talking about a yavish, that it's so dry that if you're going to touch it, it'll crumble, so maybe let's command the lesser, but not because of the Psul hodder. So, but what you're saying about Menumer, I don't know, they're going in the Mishnah Gufa, Daf Lamed Beis, and they say there's no Psul hodder. So you have to talk about Miyashiv, what would be in that, in the other cases also. But I don't know, the Shita that says that Niktam is Psul, so it's a Machlokes Tanoim if these are din hodder. But that's what Rashi explains. Rashi doesn't say why it's Psul. Rashi says why Niktam kosher, because you don't need hodder. One final mahalach and why Niktam is kosher is really, it's a chiddush, I don't really understand it. It's brought already, the Rivam brings Rabbeinu Yeshaya, but it's a little bit more about Riches later on in the Svasemis on Sukkah. And the Svasemis has a lashon Lulei Divrei Harishonim. I would say, he says that there's no discussion b'chlal by Hadas that you should need Hadar, which means nobody needs Hadar. No one, not even the Madama that says Psul needs Hadar. It's not al Hadar. The Psul is a Psul Chaser. The Psul is a Psul Chaser. The Shita that says that it's kosher. So the Lashon, he says, I didn't really understand. The Rivan says also that since it's covered, Lo Nira Chasarin, which I don't understand, because if it's Chaser, it's Chaser. The Svasema says something else. He says that only by Lulav and Aravos is a problem. Masha'inkin by Hadas, there's no problem of Chaser. The Chsiv Anaf, and Anaf in Tzarech Shalom, which means a branch, so even if it's a broken branch. So Mamela Chaser, doesn't matter. Obviously a branch, it can be caught on the bottom, but caught on the top if it's Chaser from the branch. So we had three pshatim in Hadas, why it should be kosher. Two pshatim that it still is Hadar, or a third pshat that you don't need Hadar. And now we see that could be everybody holds that you don't need Hadar. Side the Mandamar that says Niktam is Psul. Side the Mandamar that says Niktam is kosher. Everybody agrees that you don't need Hadar, and the reason why it's Psul is al Chaser. And the Mandamar that says kosher, it's not a problem of Chaser.
Mandal that says it's kosher.
Yes.
It's kosher. He needs to have three. He needs to have the shear of tefachim, including what was kosher, or he has to have it separate. Because if it's pshat that he's matil kosher, and he says that skill that's there, or is the pshat that he needs that he doesn't mind, doesn't bother him.
I would think Pasha, like the second tzad you're saying, and I will explain. A branch doesn't have to be whole, but you need a sheer branch of Gimel Tvachim. You can't come with a lumdus, a lovet, or something as if the branch is bigger. We don't mind if you're missing. I understand why you're asking. You're saying once a chaser is okay, so you have 3 tvachim, but you don't have the whole 3 tvachim because it's chaser. You need 3 tvachim. It couldn't be the 3 tvachim could be built out of a hadas that's chaser, but you need 3 tvachim. Just very bekitzer, there's a very big nafkamina between if the psul, let's say the shitas arrived that says niktam is psul, between the psul hadar and the psul chaser. The psul hadar, the pashtus, that's the shitas ataisvis lahalacha, the psul hadar, any psul hadar is a psul called shiva. And the psul chaser, the psul of lakichatam, is only b'yom harishon, the first day. So we have here a very clear machlokes rishonim brought both in halacha if niktam of a hadas is kosher or psul. We saw 3 stadim that it goes into the dinei hadar, which would mean the shitas arrived if your hadas is chopped, it's no good kol shiva. But this 4th pshat that we explained by a hadas that niktam is a chasar digedin, so then it would only be the first day. The rest of Yom Tov would be kosher l'kula alma. So l'maisa we have a machlokes, and the Ramah says toiv lahachmer. It's not clear what happens if a person only has such a type of hadas. By lulav, when there's a din of mitzvah, a certain lulav mitzvah min amufcher, so the Mishnah Berurah says you don't have to go and take somebody else's lulav. Here it's a little more. It says toiv lahachmer. So it could be if somebody has a hadas, it's knocked off on the top. And how much is niktam? Says the Bir Alacha. The Bir Alacha is machadash. B'pashas it's his Bir Alacha said. Bir Alacha is in Tafreish. Tafresh mem hey divra maschel Psul. The Bir Alacha says that the sheer niktam is b'kolshu. He says it's only brought lagabe lulav, lagabe haddasim. It's not brought. I mean, I saw others bring from the Rav and Tam Dame. I couldn't find it. It's a very long siman, Reish Lamed Beis. But they bring that the Rav already says that the kol shu. But al kapam is a psul lefi the Rav the kol shu, and this kol shu is a psul either al chaser or a psul al tzadid. The Ramah says v'tayv lahachmer. Let's go into Arava. We just have a brief few minutes, but we'll go into Arava. L'maisa this month we're learning Haddasim and Aravos. So we spoke about till now Niktam by Haddas. Now we'll go into Niktam by Arava. So really, if you learn the Shulchan Aruch, the Noisa Kalim, there isn't a lot what to talk about. The halacha is clear. Niktam is Psul. There is a Shitas Aramim that it's kosher, but the Shulchan Aruch Niktam, you have a Arava got cut off on the top. Spend another $5, buy a new package. Niktam is Psul. It's Psul. However, quite a few years ago, talking about in recent years, there was somebody from Lakewood. I knew him. He's not alive anymore. Abdava Tumim looked into the Aravos, and he came out that there should be a problem any time there isn't a leaf on the top of the Arava. There should be a problem that may be Niktam. Why? Why should it be a Pchashash, maybe Niktam? The way how Reb Shlomo Zalman explains, and I had the opportunity now before Night Seder to be by the owner of Monsey Aravos. He gave me a whole bunch. All these Aravos are all lavluf. He told me at this point, it's not done yet. The tree is not done, so mainly there's a leaf on the top which is known as lavluf. All the trees, a lot have lavlov. Once the arava is done, then there's no more lavlov. Anyways, we'll pass it around. Everyone over here has, on the top of it, has a leaf. Has a leaf on the top. It ends by a leaf. Why? If it would not end by a leaf, then you have to be choishish that not only the leaf fell off, but while the leaf falling off, a piece of the branch also fell off. So if the leaf falls off, we're not concerned. The Magen Avram says that a person should try and have all the leaves on. So for that, you could be careful. Rabbi Zalman said, on that I would be careful to have all the leaves. But he said that if you're not going to have this top leaf over here, we have to be choishish that maybe it's when it fell off. It's okay if the top leaf fell off, but while the top leaf fell off, a little piece of the branch also came off. It's very soft, and Memela, that would be Niktam.
It's called Niktam? Was it by itself?
Oh, so Reb Shlomo Zalman has these a lot that were shoyal on him to say it's not an issue. The Mayadam Izman Rav Moshe Sternbach says you should be machmer for to have a leaf on the top, but the ones that were matmiya, Reb Shlomo Zalman says, what is it different than an esrig if the pitim falls off? If the pitim falls off, if it's on the tree, it's not a problem. So just like over there, if it falls off, it's not a problem. Here also, al pi roiv, it falls off on the tree. And now he explained to me just before, once it's done, others bring it also, once it's done growing, the lavlov, the top leaf falls off. It stops, it hardens on the top, it doesn't let any diseases come in, it's hard, it's done, it stops. So Mamela, it usually falls off on the tree. Shlomo Zalman says if you know for sure it fell off later, could be taki, you have to be choishish for a niktam. But it always usually falls off before. So Mamela, why is it a problem? He actually told me that it's very hard in a year like this year of Ibiyar to even get a lavlov. The way how they get lavlov is they trim down the tree in the beginning of the summer, so it's a young tree, it grows, so it has more koiches to grow, and while it grows, there's still lavlov, as opposed to if it's old, it's hard, so then it stops early and the lavlov discontinues. So Mamela, but now it's already more or less finishing growing. He said now is the end of the lavlov. You'll take a look at some of them. Some of them that are already starting to get brown, and the leaf, that piece, that green piece is already turning brown. Another little bit, it's going to fall off. But Rav Shlomo Zalman says if it falls off on the tree, it's not a problem because just like an esrig, he said that it's different because when esrig, the pitim is not a cheluk of the esrig. Mashayke, this is a cheluk. What?
But the esrog and the kuma had like a simon that it was on.
You could tell if, yeah, but we're talking about even if it fell on the tree. He wanted to say that even if it falls off on the tree, it's a problem. It's interesting, in Eimek HaTshuva, Reb Chatzkel Rot, for a different reason, wants to say it's not a problem, because he wants to say even not the leaf, the soft part that would come off with it, that's also like the leaf, that wouldn't cause an issue of Niktam. So that would be another reason why lavlov, there should be no need of lavlov. And finally, the Evan Yisrael, B'Sol Yaakov Fisher, says a different reason, which is, to sound a little bit of Chiddush, he says is that it's Eider Nir L'Ayin, it's Eider Nicker, which means when it falls off, Imamish brings, just like we spoke before, by Haddasim, it's covered over, you don't see, it's fine. So by Aravos, if the top leaf falls off and it pulls along a little bit with it, when you take a look, you don't see any Niktam. So Mamela, also he says it should be kosher. He says, V'loi shamanu v'kahal ad doira achron lechipsu arovim lavlov. So Mamela he says, you don't have to be mahader. Lamaisa, we see Chad Gisa, yeah, Shlomo Zalman said for a different reason, maybe it's kedai to be makbid, they say not to. So we have over here, so to speak, a shaila about lavlov, but just to be besakim, in the Haddasim, these are machloikis if Niktam is kosher or Psul, the Ramah says toiv lahachmer, and by Aravos, Niktam is Psul, and we just discussed if lavlov, if there's no lavlov, if there's no leaf on the top, then maybe there's a shaila, there's a tzad, could be it's Niktam, and the olim could pass around, could look at these Haddasim, ad Aravos to see the lavlov.